Lucas sat by the window, staring blankly at the kids playing soccer in the street. Once he had been one of them, chasing the ball, running faster than anyone, feeling the rush of the game. But that felt like a lifetime ago. Now all he could do was watch, trapped in his wheelchair, his legs as still as the chair itself. His world had shrunk to this small apartment, his movements limited to what his parents or caregivers could help with. Before the accident, Lucas had dreams. He wanted to be a professional athlete, maybe a soccer player or a runner. He had a natural talent for sports and the drive to make it. But that was before the crash that shattered not just his body, but his spirit too. It wasn't just the loss of movement, it was the loss of his identity. Who was Lucas without sports? Without running? Without the freedom of his own body? His parents tried to be supportive, but Lucas couldn't stand their pity. Every time his mother suggested they go outside for fresh air, he would push her away. His father, once so proud of Lucas's athletic achievements, seemed unsure how to speak to him now. There were awkward silences where once there had been shared excitement about the next game or competition. Lucas's friends stopped coming around too. At first they visited, unsure of what to say, trying to cheer him up with jokes or stories from school. But slowly the visits became fewer and fewer until they stopped altogether. Lucas didn't blame them. He wouldn't want to hang around a broken version of himself either. He felt lost, stuck in a body that no longer obeyed him and a life that felt meaningless. Every day was the same walls, the same routine, the same pity in his parents' eyes. It was suffocating. One evening, after yet another failed attempt by his mom to get him to go outside, Lucas wheeled himself back to his room and slammed the door shut. He stared at his old soccer cleats, dusty and forgotten in the corner. It was a reminder of everything he had lost. Anger bubbled up inside him, followed quickly by despair. What was the point of any of this? Without sports, without his legs, who was he anymore? The following week, Lucas reluctantly accompanied his mother to another physiotherapy session. It had become a routine he barely tolerated, but he knew it was necessary. He mostly kept to himself during the appointments, barely interacting with anyone. However, something caught his attention that day. As they wheeled him into the facility, Lucas heard the distinct sound of bouncing basketballs echoing down the hallway. The familiar rhythm stirred something inside him, a faint but undeniable memory of the athlete he used to be. Curious despite himself, Lucas asked his mother to wheel him over to the gym where the noise was coming from. What he saw stopped him in his tracks. Inside, a group of people, all in wheelchairs, were playing basketball. The speed, the agility, the pure energy of the game, it was nothing like what Lucas had imagined. They were fast, competitive, fierce. For the first time since the accident, Lucas felt a flicker of excitement watching a sport. "Do you want to try?" A voice broke into his thoughts. Lucas turned to see a young man, probably in his early 20s, sitting in a wheelchair next to him. The guy had a friendly smile, but there was something intense in his eyes, a kind of determination that made Lucas feel slightly uncomfortable. "We could always use more players," the man continued. "I don't think so," Lucas mumbled, shaking his head. "I'm not really into sports anymore." The man raised an eyebrow. "Used to be though, right? I can tell." He pointed to the way Lucas had been watching the game, almost like he was analyzing the plays. "I'm Tiago, by the way," he added, offering his hand. "Lucas," he replied hesitantly, shaking Tiago's hand. "Look, Lucas, I get it. The chair changes everything. It makes you feel like your old self is gone for good. But trust me, man, once you're out there on the court, it feels different. You get a bit of that back. You should give it a shot." Lucas wanted to refuse, but something in Tiago's words hit home. The old Lucas, the one who thrived on competition and pushing his limits, had been buried since the accident. But seeing these players now, who were so alive and determined, made him wonder, could he really get a part of that back, even if it was just a glimpse? Before he knew it, Tiago was wheeling over a spare chair. "Come on, at least sit in it. Feel it out." Lucas hesitated but finally gave in, transferring into the basketball chair with Tiago's help. The chair felt different, more agile, designed for quick movements. For a moment, Lucas felt a bit of that old excitement, but the doubts quickly returned. "I don't know if this is for me," Lucas muttered. "One step at a time, Lucas," Tiago said with a grin. "Just one step at a time." The next few days, Lucas couldn't stop thinking about that first experience on the court. Even though he had barely done anything, just sitting in that specialized wheelchair had stirred something inside him, something he hadn't felt in months. But with that excitement came a wave of doubts. Could he really do this? What if he made a fool of himself? He hadn't even fully accepted his situation, let alone embraced a sport that required using the very thing he hated, the wheelchair. Despite his reservations, Lucas found himself back at the gym later that week. Tiago greeted him with a wide grin, clearly excited to see him return. "I knew you'd be back," Tiago teased, passing Lucas the spare wheelchair. "Yeah, well, let's not get ahead of ourselves," Lucas muttered, not wanting to admit that part of him was curious about how far he could go with this. The practice started, and it was immediately clear to Lucas just how difficult it would be. The other players moved with a fluidity and control that Lucas couldn't even begin to mimic. His chair wobbled as he tried to turn, and every attempt to dribble the ball felt awkward. When he tried to shoot, the ball barely left his hands before falling short of the hoop. Frustration mounted quickly. "Damn it!" Lucas cursed under his breath after yet another failed attempt to make a basket. He glanced over at Tiago, who seemed to be watching him from the corner of his eye. Lucas was waiting for a smirk or a comment, but Tiago simply gave him an encouraging nod. "It's not supposed to be easy," Tiago said, wheeling over. "But you've got the instincts, man. You'll get there." Lucas shook his head. "I don't know. Maybe this just isn't for me." Tiago let out a small laugh. "You said the same thing last time, and yet here you are." Lucas knew he had a point, but it didn't make the frustration any easier to swallow. Watching the other players maneuver their chairs with precision only deepened his doubts. How long would it take to be even half as good as them? Maybe it would be better to quit now, save himself the embarrassment. But Tiago seemed to sense his hesitation. "Listen," he said, "we've all been where you are. No one comes in here knowing how to do this. It's all about patience and practice. I had to fail over and over before I started feeling comfortable in the chair. You've just got to give yourself time." Lucas sighed, not sure if he believed Tiago. Still, there was something about his persistence that Lucas couldn't ignore. Maybe he did need to give it more time. Maybe he owed it to himself to at least try. "All right," Lucas finally said, gripping the wheels of his chair a little tighter. "I'll keep going." "Good," Tiago grinned. "We'll get you there." The practice continued, and although Lucas made little progress, there was a small part of him that started to enjoy the challenge. His body might not have been the same, but the competitive spirit inside him wasn't completely gone. And for the first time in a long while, Lucas began to wonder if this new version of himself could find a place in the world of sports after all. Weeks passed, and Lucas found himself returning to the gym more frequently. Each time he felt a little less like an outsider and a little more like part of the team. His hands, once clumsy on the wheels of the basketball chair, started to move with more confidence. His turns became sharper, his speed quicker, and he finally managed to dribble the ball without losing control. One evening after practice, Lucas sat with Tiago and a few of the other players in the locker room. They joked and laughed like old friends, and for the first time since his accident, Lucas felt a sense of belonging. These guys understood him. They knew the struggles of living in a body that didn't always cooperate, and yet they had found ways to thrive. There was no pity, no awkwardness, just camaraderie. "You're getting good, man," Tiago said, tossing Lucas a towel. "I knew you had it in you." "Thanks," Lucas replied, feeling a strange warmth from the compliment. "It's been different, but I'm starting to like it. It's not just about the game, you know," said one of the other players, Rafael, as he packed up his gear. "It's about being part of something again. When I first started, I thought it was just about learning to play in the chair. But it's more than that. It's like rediscovering a part of yourself you thought you lost." Lucas nodded. He knew exactly what Rafael meant. It wasn't just the physical aspect of the game that was changing him. Being here with these people was reminding him of who he used to be, a competitor, someone who didn't back down from a challenge. As the weeks went by, Lucas became closer to his teammates, especially Tiago. Tiago had a way of pushing him just hard enough without making him feel overwhelmed. He would encourage Lucas when he needed it, but also knew when to step back and let Lucas figure things out for himself. One evening, after a particularly intense practice, Lucas stayed behind with Tiago. The gym was quiet except for the sound of their wheels turning on the polished floor. "You've come a long way, Lucas," Tiago said, spinning his chair around to face him. "You feel it, don't you? That part of yourself you thought was gone." Lucas was silent for a moment, then nodded. "Yeah, I feel different. Like maybe this isn't the end, you know? Like there's still something out there for me." Tiago grinned. "Exactly. I told you, once you're back on the court, things start to shift. You're not just the guy in the chair anymore. You're a player. You're part of a team." For the first time in a long while, Lucas felt hopeful. Maybe Tiago was right. Maybe there was more to his story than just the accident and the loss. Maybe, just maybe, this was the beginning of something new. The day of the regional tournament arrived sooner than Lucas expected. His nerves were on edge as he and his teammates gathered in the locker room before their first game. The gym was packed, the air buzzing with excitement from the crowd. Lucas could feel the pressure building inside him. This wasn't just any practice session. This was real competition, and for the first time, he was a starting player. "Take a deep breath," Tiago said, noticing the tension in Lucas's posture. "You've got this." Lucas nodded but wasn't sure if he believed it. The doubts that had plagued him at the beginning of his journey crept back into his mind. What if he wasn't good enough? What if he failed and let the team down? But there wasn't time to dwell on those thoughts. The game was about to start. As the players wheeled onto the court, the noise from the crowd surged. Lucas's heart raced as he lined up for the tip-off. The referee's whistle blew and the game began. The first few minutes were a blur of fast movements, the sound of wheels squeaking on the court, and the thud of the ball bouncing between hands. Lucas focused on keeping up, trying to stay in position, and remember everything he had learned in practice. Despite his nerves, Lucas quickly realized that something had changed. The movements that once felt awkward and difficult now felt more natural. He was passing, defending, and even managed to steal the ball at one point. But the other team was strong, and the score remained close throughout the game. As the final quarter approached, the intensity ramped up. Lucas felt the exhaustion setting in, but there was no time to rest. With only a few minutes left on the clock, the score was tied. The tension in the gym was palpable. Every point mattered. "Stay focused!" Tiago shouted from across the court. "We can win this!" Lucas nodded, sweat dripping down his face as he tightened his grip on the wheels of his chair. He knew the next few plays could decide everything. And then it happened. The opposing team fumbled a pass and the ball rolled toward Lucas. Instinctively, he dove for it, grabbing the ball just before another player could reach it. The crowd roared as Lucas began to wheel down the court, adrenaline coursing through his veins. He could see the hoop ahead, and everything else faded into the background. His teammates were shouting, but their voices felt distant as Lucas focused on the basket. Time seemed to slow down as he approached the three-point line. He had two options: pass the ball to a teammate or take the shot himself. For a brief second, Lucas hesitated. Was he really ready to take this shot? What if he missed? But then something clicked inside him. This was his moment, the culmination of everything he had worked for. Without thinking twice, Lucas pulled back his arms and released the ball. It soared through the air, spinning toward the hoop as the crowd collectively held its breath. The ball hit the rim, bounced once, twice, and then with a satisfying swish, dropped through the net. The gym exploded with cheers, and Lucas's teammates rushed toward him, shouting in celebration. They had done it. They had won. For a moment, Lucas couldn't believe it. He had taken the shot. He had made the basket. The weight of the victory and everything it represented hit him all at once. He felt a surge of emotion, realizing that this wasn't just about winning a game. This was about proving to himself that he still had the strength, the courage, and the will to succeed. As his teammates gathered around him, Lucas caught Tiago's eye from across the court. Tiago smiled and gave him a thumbs up, the pride evident on his face. Lucas smiled back, his heart still racing. He had found his place again, on the court, in life, and within himself. The celebration continued long after the final whistle, with the team exchanging high fives and hugs, reveling in their victory. Lucas felt an overwhelming sense of pride, something he hadn't felt in what seemed like forever. This win wasn't just about the game, it was about proving that he could still achieve something great. It felt like the beginning of a new chapter in his life. As the crowd slowly started to disperse and the team made their way back to the locker room, Lucas looked around for Tiago. He wanted to thank him, None of this would have been possible without his support and encouragement. But to his surprise, Thiago wasn't there. Lucas scanned the court and the sidelines, but there was no sign of him. "Hey, have you guys seen Thiago?" Lucas asked a few of his teammates as they gathered their things. "Thiago?" One of the players, Rafael, gave him a confused look. "What do you mean?" Lucas frowned. "Yeah, Thiago, he was the one who got me into all this. Helped me train and everything." Rafael exchanged a glance with another player, both of them looking uneasy. "Lucas," Rafael started carefully. He's not here." "What are you talking about?" Lucas's confusion deepened. "I was just with him earlier." Rafael sighed and sat down on the bench. "Thiago died 2 years ago, Lucas, in a car accident just like yours." Lucas felt like the ground had been pulled from under him. "What?" His voice came out in a whisper. That's not possible. I've been training with him for weeks. He was here. Today." The other players looked at each other again, this time with a mix of sadness and concern. Rafael placed a hand on Lucas's shoulder. "I don't know what to say, man. Thiago was a huge part of this team before the accident. He helped a lot of people. His story inspired a lot of us to keep pushing. But he's gone." Lucas stood there in stunned silence. It couldn't be true. He had talked to Thiago, practiced with him, laughed with him. He had been there, pushing him to be better. The memories of their conversations, the encouragement, the shared moments, they were all real, weren't they? But as the realization began to sink in, Lucas started piecing things together. The way Thiago had always known exactly what to say, the way he seemed to understand Lucas's struggles on a deeper level. It was as if Thiago had been more than just a teammate. He had been a guide, a mentor, someone helping Lucas to heal from within. "His story lives on, Lucas," Rafael said gently. "And in a way, he's still here with us. We all carry a part of him. Maybe that's what you've been feeling. Maybe he's been guiding you all along." Lucas's heart pounded in his chest as the truth settled over him like a blanket. Thiago hadn't been physically there, but his presence, his spirit, had helped Lucas through the darkest moments of his journey. Thiago's story had become part of Lucas's story, and in a strange way, that connection had given him the strength to push forward. Suddenly, everything made sense. Thiago's words, his encouragement, even his absence at the end of the game, it all pointed to the fact that Thiago was gone, but his influence had remained, lifting Lucas when he needed it most. The emotion hit Lucas like a tidal wave, and he sat down heavily on the bench, running a hand through his hair. He didn't know whether to feel sad or grateful, maybe both. Thiago had given him something invaluable, hope, and now it was Lucas's turn to carry that torch forward, to be that beacon of strength for someone else. "I can't believe it," Lucas whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "It's hard to wrap your head around," Rafael agreed. "But that's how powerful his legacy is. He's still helping people, even now." Lucas sat quietly for a moment, letting the weight of the revelation sink in. He realized now that his journey hadn't just been about learning to play basketball again. It had been about rediscovering himself with the help of someone who had already walked that path. Thiago may have been gone, but his spirit had never left. And now Lucas knew that he had the strength to keep moving forward, not just for himself, but for others, just like Thiago had done. In the weeks that followed, Lucas couldn't stop thinking about Thiago, both the man he had known and the legacy he had left behind. The revelation still felt surreal, but Lucas had come to accept it. What Thiago represented went beyond a simple teammate or mentor. He was a symbol of resilience, a reminder that even after the darkest moments, there was still light to be found. Lucas returned to practice, but this time with a different mindset. He wasn't just playing for himself anymore. Now there was a deeper purpose, a desire to continue what Thiago had started, to be there for others who needed someone to believe in them, just as Thiago had done for him. One afternoon after practice, Lucas noticed a new player sitting off to the side, watching the others on the court but not participating. The boy looked nervous, his hands gripping the wheels of his chair tightly. Lucas recognized that look, the fear, the uncertainty, the doubt. It was the same way he had felt when he first joined the team. "Hey," Lucas said as he wheeled over to the boy, giving him a friendly nod. "You here to play?" The boy looked up, hesitating for a moment before shaking his head. I don't know, I don't think I'm ready. Lucas smiled softly. I get it. I wasn't ready either when I first got here. It takes time to feel comfortable. But trust me, you'll get there. And when you do, it'll feel amazing. The boy looked unsure but seemed to take some comfort in Lucas's words. How did you do it? How did you get over all of this? He gestured toward his wheelchair, the frustration clear in his voice. Lucas paused for a moment, thinking about the right words. I didn't do it alone, he finally said. There was someone who helped me, someone who believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. And that made all the difference. The boy's eyes softened. Do you think I could do this? Lucas nodded firmly. Absolutely. We'll work on it together, one step at a time. It was a full circle moment for Lucas. He had gone from being the one who needed guidance to becoming the guide himself. And in that moment, he realized something important. Tiago's legacy wasn't just about inspiring others. It was about passing that inspiration forward, creating a chain of support and encouragement that would last far beyond any individual. Lucas began mentoring the boy, just as Tiago had mentored him. He showed him the basics of wheelchair basketball, offering tips and support, encouraging him to push through the initial difficulties. It wasn't easy. The boy faced many of the same frustrations Lucas had, but Lucas was patient, knowing that progress took time. With each practice, Lucas saw the boy's confidence grow, and with it, his own sense of purpose deepened. In helping this new player, Lucas felt closer to Tiago than ever. It was as if Tiago's presence had never truly left. It lived on in the actions and choices Lucas made. Every time he gave encouragement, every time he saw that spark of belief ignite in someone else's eyes, Lucas knew he was honoring Tiago's memory. One day after a long practice, the boy made his first successful basket. It was a small victory, but to Lucas it felt monumental. As the boy smiled in triumph, Lucas felt a rush of pride, similar to what Tiago must have felt when he first saw Lucas begin to believe in himself. See, I told you it would happen, Lucas said with a grin, giving the boy a pat on the back. The boy smiled back, his face beaming with a new sense of confidence. Thanks, Lucas. I couldn't have done it without you. Lucas nodded but remained quiet for a moment, feeling the weight of those words. You're not alone in this, he said quietly. None of us are. As they wheeled off the court together, Lucas looked up at the sky, feeling a deep sense of peace. He had come so far, from a place of darkness and hopelessness to one of strength and purpose. The journey hadn't been easy, and there were still challenges ahead. But Lucas knew that he wasn't walking that path alone. Tiago's story had become his story, and now Lucas was ready to carry that legacy forward, helping others discover their own strength in the process. And just like that, Lucas had found his new mission: to be the mentor, the guide, the beacon of hope for those who needed it most. He understood now that true strength wasn't just about physical ability. It was about lifting others up, just as Tiago had done for him. In the end, Lucas had become more than just a player on the court. He had become part of something much bigger, a legacy of resilience, hope, and the power of believing in yourself, even when the world feels like it's falling apart. Did you enjoy the story? If Lucas's journey moved you, make sure to leave a like and subscribe to our channel. You'll find many more inspiring stories here about the transformative power of sports in people's lives. Don't miss our upcoming videos. There's a lot of great content on the way. And we want to hear from you. Do you have a personal experience where sports changed your life? Share your story in the comments. Let's build a community where inspiration and resilience are always at the heart. Together, we can keep this conversation about sports and life going strong.